Hello everybody and welcome to this week's edition of Pinto's Preview, FCS Playoffs second round, as NDSU will be taking on the South Dakota State University Jackrabbits, who won their first round playoff game against the Eastern Illinois Panthers 58-10. In that game, Zach Zenner ran for 295 yards. So a big game for the sophomore running back from South Dakota State, who finished 7th in the Walter Payton voting. Walter Payton is the FCS award equivalent to the Heisman, which goes to the top player in the FBS. So a little odd there in my mind. I know a lot of other people think it's kind of odd too that Zach Zenner would finish so low after the season he had, leading all that FCS in rushing. Be that as it may, he's coming to the Fargo Dome along with the rest of the Jackrabbits to take on NDSU in a rematch from a game back on November 10th, a game that NDSU ended up winning 20-17. That game, or at least events in that game, are part of my points in Pinto's preview. First point I want to make, Levon Perry, and specifically the injury to Levon Perry. Now, it's been well documented here in the Fargo area that Levon Perry was taken out by guard Alex Parker of South Dakota State. The play in question, considered dirty by some. Talked to South Dakota State people, from Coach John Stiglmeyer to the radio voice Tyler Merriam. They say not a dirty play, it's a non-issue for South Dakota State. In my opinion, it's an issue for NDSU, and I think they're going to use that to their advantage, whether it be bulletin board material or whether the players go out and have a little added incentive when they're finishing some blocks or finishing some tackles against the South Dakota State Jackrabbits. Not anything dirty, mind you, but just something to go, you know what, you hurt one of our players, we're going to bring the wood. That's something I think you need to look for in this game. Second point I want to make is Gate Citibank Field at the Fargo Dome. This place is electric and will be on Saturday. It'll be packed to the brim. People will be hanging from the rafters. It'll be nuts. And South Dakota State knows that, and they've been in this environment before. How do they handle it? I think they'll handle it okay. And that's going to be a disadvantage for NDSU. Why? Well, you think about it. Think of the teams that came in last year, from James Madison to Lehigh to Georgia Southern. They didn't expect or realize what the Fargo Dome was going to be like when they stepped onto the field in those 3 games. South Dakota State knows what it's like there, and they understand that the noise level is going to play a factor, but there's no intimidation factor for the South Dakota State Jackrabbits, so I think they're going to play okay, just fine. They're going to be all right under the bright lights and the loud noise of the Fargo Dome. The third point I want to make is playmakers, and we look at 2, one for NDSU and one for SDSU. For South Dakota State, it's Zach Zenner, the running back who led the FCS in rushing this year. Guy was an outstanding player. He proved it in last week's game, 295 yards against Eastern Illinois. Only had 43 yards rushing against NDSU in their first meeting. Can NDSU bottle up a runner as good as Zach Zenner is 2 times? It's tough to say. We'll see if the NDSU front line can do it. I think because the front line is so dominant that Zach Zenner, again, is going to have a tough time running the ball, which brings us to our NDSU playmaker, who is Marcus Williams. Marcus Williams, in my mind, an outstanding athlete, a game changer, and everybody knows that. The punt return against Illinois State really swung the momentum, kept NDSU in that game for when the second half came about, and they just ran all over the Redbirds. Marcus Williams gets his hand on a pick, on a punt return, even on a kick return. That's going to change momentum, and it's going to come down to turnovers and special teams in this game. And now for my prediction. Been going over this game over and over and over again in my head, and finally to me it comes out 24-13 NDSU with the victory. Reason being is that NDSU is going to do a better job of handling the lows and highs that are going to come in this 60-minute contest. They've been here before. A lot of these players played in the Montana State game, the Eastern Washington game, back to the Robert Morris, and a lot of them played in last year's playoff run. Only 8 seniors on this team, so in my opinion, South Dakota State had a very easy first-round game against Eastern Illinois. It's just going to be something they're not going to be able to handle when the big plays happen, and NDSU is going to be able to ride that momentum to a victory and move on to the quarterfinals of the FCS playoffs. For Pinto's Previews and KFGO.com, I'm Daniel Gunderson.